chauvinist imperialist monarchies give the Nazis their ideology, staff and propaganda organs, and the Ruhr steel tycoons gave the Nazis financing, which was later picked up by other German businessmen from IG Farbenindustrie. One of the most advanced companies in the world took on the task of building the economy and preparing the Nazis for war. But we should not think that German chemists only came to the Nazis in 1933. Let's think of the proto-fascist Werner Dein, who was been a member of the NSDAP since 1931. As well as the director of one of the IG Farben plants. This is what he wrote in the far year 1916. A new type of state socialism is emerging. Private economic initiative and private capitalist economy will not be eliminated, but will be regulated from the point of view of state socialism. This shift in capitalism naturally and logically calls for a structuring of the movement that was previously a counterbalance to it, international socialism. The latter will become National Socialism. It is clear from this that the author sees a kind of state socialism under National Socialism, and under state socialism there is a way of regulating private capitalist relations, which in turn is meant to be counterbalance to international socialism. It follows that the National Socialism is a way of managing the capitalist economy and its main task is to combat international socialism, i.e. communism, and the labor movement. In short, National Socialism is a nationally oriented capitalism. In fact, all of Deitz's philosophical works are permitted with something like this, plus chauvinism and imperialism a la rabid racist Heinrich Claus. These two are probably among the first shape the views of German capitalists and monarchists on a single doctrine of National Socialism. However, in Deitz's words, the essence of National Socialism, in Claus's words, was fierce anti-communism, opposition to the international labor movement and proletarian revolutions, as well as particularly rabid imperialism, chauvinism and racism. When Hitler came to power, however, Deitz's philosophical works were widely disseminated by IG Farben's information department, indeed the most reactionary elements of financial capital. All of this clearly confirms that the ideas of Nazism among German chemists have been around for a very long time, but for the time being there was simply no consensus on the future of the company. But the crisis has helped to sort everything out. However, before we move on to the World War II, we need to step back a bit. Preparing for the war is a long process, and every businessman knows that if you are going to have a war somewhere, it will be nice to disguise your private property in the territory of a potential enemy. And now the question. Have you ever thought about why Switzerland was not attacked by anyone during either World War I or World War II? Perhaps because it is a mountains country that declared neutrality, where every resident is armed and all roads and tunnels are mined? I don't think so. Switzerland is a financial offshore where businessmen not only hide their money, but also register all kinds of companies in order to lose the owner of the company with the help of various intricacies. And in the event of war, it is necessary that the enemy side cannot seize the property of its opponent. In this way, capitalists will be able to do business in the enemy's territory and the proceeds would be transferred to their own economy through offshore locations. But this is one side of the coin. Offshores are also needed so that you can haggle with your enemy without being noticed from your beloved homeland. Countries like Switzerland need to be able to solve their business affairs through front companies when they should not be solved directly. After all, how can you hide super profits from the war and get away from taxes without offshore operation? One man's war for is another man's profit. All world business is interested in a free and independent Switzerland, and if business is against occupation, then no tyrant or dictator can change that. The need for reliable offshore location has not overtaken the need for entrepreneurs from IG Farben. In 1928, they set up a company in Switzerland called IG Chemie, which the following year registered the American IG Chemical Corporation on its Swiss name. Looking ahead, according to a report from the US War Office in Germany, IG Farben industry controlled over 500 companies in 93 different countries by the end of the war. It was also linked to foreign concerns by 2,000 cartel agreements. These included such giants as Standard Oil of New Jersey, now it's ExxonMobil, the Aluminum Company of America, now it's Alcoa, the American chemical conglomerate DuPont, and the fuel company Ethyl Export Corporation, British chemical conglomerate Imperial Chemical Industries, American chemical conglomerate Dow Chemical Company, chemical company Rome and Haas, French chemical company Kuhlmann, and Japanese financial and industrial group Mitsu. We will look at only one of these agreements, the conspiracy of IG Farben with the largest American concern, Standard Oil of New Jersey, or in the old days just Standard Oil. The rapprochement of these companies began in March of 1926. When a Standard Oil employee, Frank Howard, visited the IG Farben plant in Ludwigshafen, the representative of the world's largest natural oil group was shown the process by which ordinary coal can be turned into real gasoline. Howard wrote in his report to the chairman of the Standard Oil, "Based on my observation and negotiations today, I consider this case to be the most important one our company has faced since the dissolution of the original Standard Oil Company. Body shape bus can produce high-quality motor fuel from lignite and other low-grade coals in quantities equal to half the volume of coal. This certainly means that Europe is independent in terms of gasoline supply. All that remains is open competition in terms of prices. Thanks to technical progress, IG Farben was able to hit the giant Standard Oil Group directly, and all oil companies in general. As a result of this threat, Standard Oil has agreed to conclude a long-term agreement. In 1921, Standard Oil and Farben signed an agreement to share world markets. Standard Oil recognized the priority right of IG Farben in the field of chemistry, and IG Farben recognized the right of Standard Oil in the oil industry, except for Germany. All Standard Oil chemistry discoveries, if they are not closely related to the oil industry, must be transferred to IG Farben, in return for which German chemists have made the same promise in the field of oil development, except for those to be used exclusively in Germany. Two companies were established to implement this transaction. Already mentioned American IG Chemical Company, owned by Swiss offshore company IG Farben, and JESCO, Joint American Study Company. In addition to representatives of IG Farben, there were such prominent people amongst the members of the American IG board as Walter Tigley, chairman of the board of directors of Standard Oil, Edsel Ford, president of Ford Motor Company in those years, son of the same Ford, Charles Edwin Mitchell, president of Citibank, Paul Warburg, financier, banker, and former deputy chairman of the Board of Federal Reserve System of the United States of America. Another company, JESCO, was founded in 1930 to operate chemical patents. Also, Standard Oil and IG Farben owned the company 50-50. The chemical concern still retained control over the patents it had developed, including synthetic rubber patents. This meant that Standard Oil could negotiate rubber patents with American companies, but only with the permission of IG Farben industry. In this way, German business was taking over almost the entire American synthetic rubber market. And not only did it sabotage, but it also sabotaged any of the Americans' own developments in this field throughout the 30s. The American public will only find out about this after the US enters World War II, after Pearl Harbor, and after Rivers of American Blood. It will then be discovered that there are not enough synthetic rubber developments to meet the needs of the military industry, and the Germans suddenly do not grant a manufacturing license. At the same time, American businessmen from Standard Oil are covering the Germans. Physically, there were patents in the USA, but the cartel agreement did not permit to make them available for anyone without IG Farben's permission. It was only after a misunderstanding, such as a deliberate destruction of the military economy, that the patents of the Standard Oil will be seized in March 1942. In this way, the German chemical concern was active in the United States even during the officially declared war between these countries. Thanks to the effort of Standard Oil, Nazi Germany was able to supply its products to world markets despite all efforts of the British blockade. Naturally, in those years, the American branch of IG Farben was already operating under a completely different name. In 1939, IG was renamed as General Line and Film from Switzerland. But even so, a mutually beneficial private partnership does not end there. In 1936, the Nazis asked IG Farben to use his connections to purchase 300 million worth of modern equivalent of gasoline via Standard Oil. For obvious reasons, the American corporation was not at all confused by the fact that the company was selling fuel, albeit synthetic fuel, and suddenly decided to buy it in bulk. The American was doubly imperturbable because of well-known fact of the increased militarization of Nazi Germany. The Standard Oil businessmen acted completely stolidity just before the 1938 Nazi invasion in Czechoslovakia, when the same IG Farben asked for 500 tons of tetraethyl lead, an additive for aviation fuel. And this is provided that shortly before, Standard Oil had already given IG Farben plans and specifications for the production of this very tetraethyl lead. Subsequently, August von Nyrem, a member of the NSDAP since 1942 and an employee of the Nuremberg Tribunal, writes in his testimony, "Without tetraethyl lead, the modern method of warfare would not have been possible. The fact that we were able to produce tetraethyl lead from the very beginning of the war can only be explained by the fact that shortly before the Americans had provided us with their production plans with all the technical information. In fact, the reason for actions of the major American, British and other global corporations in their dealings with German business are quite simple. They did everything possible to please the Nazis. They all understood very well that World War II was an inevitability, but they all wanted to direct this devilish machine of fascism there, to the east, towards the Soviet Union. But as Fritz Thyssen wrote in his memoirs, they just couldn't work together. The Third Reich was too unbridled, and with all its wild hatred of the workers in the world, it also had claims against the English, French and American capitalists. The need for imperialist revenge caused by the defeat in World War I has never gone away in all these years. Following an international military tribunal, the Nuremberg minor trials of former Nazi German leaders took place in the American zone of occupation. These trials are distinguished by the fact that they took place without the participation of the international community and exclusively by the Americans themselves. A total of 12 lawsuits were held. 3 of them were against businessmen: the Friedrich Flick case, the IG Farben case, and the Alfred Krupp case. 24 members of IG Farben's management were accused of massacres for slavery, robbery, war, etc. However, as a result of the trial, none of the representatives of the chemical group were sentenced to the capital punishment, and 10 defendants were acquitted. However, the average term for those who were found guilty was 4 years in prison. Moreover, a large amnesty was granted, and even those who had received more than 4 years in prison were released from prison. The fact is that the Second World War was followed almost immediately by a new war, the Cold War. The capitalist countries, unlike the Soviet Union, did not denationalize the occupied territories, unless it is absolutely conditional. The Americans urgently needed local business representatives to form a strong foothold in the fight against communists. And who were the most powerful businessmen familiar with the specifics of the German economy? Those who were in some way or other connected to the Third Reich. Not only the Nazis from IG Farben got away with a slight fright, but also other representatives of industrial concerns, including those who were convicted of using slaves in their companies. Because you have to understand, Auschwitz was not the only private enterprise involved in these crimes. We can truly see the golden rule of capitalism. Steal bread and get 10 years of strict regime. Steal hundreds of thousands of human lives and get fined. However, the mass amnesty gave the Nazi criminals not only freedom, but also the return of confiscated property. As a result, most Nazi capitalists were able to regain their positions in German business communities fairly quickly. The former member companies of IG Farben, Bayer AG, FAS, AGFA and Hoist AG still exist in one form or another. Now you know the secret of their success and the world-famous company Bayer AG.